the standards community folder for those that are not visible to it today. So presumably you can take control back.
I think this is the best decision you've made so far this week.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Dare. As Mauricio's getting set up, also for those, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are missing this meeting that might have need to set up meetings. You can probably contact Mauricio at some point in time. He'll be happy to walk you through that for the first time. It's relatively easy for us, Mauricio and myself, since we've done it many times, but it might be a little quirky the first time around.
Okay, so I just want to start things off by saying that these accounts that we've issued to you guys have a 25-person limit. So if you have a subgroup that has more than that limit, you're gonna need to let me know so I can schedule it on our bigger account of 100 people. So
yeah, so we know Rick will probably need that, and probably a study group.
I already took care of Rick, so he's good.
I'm always over 30.
So just let me know if you expect to have more people. I know 25 CSS and the SPIP group are two good examples of some of the larger subgroups. Okay, so to log into these meetings, the GoToMeeting.com URL is probably the best way to start. There's a sign in right here. You could sign in. I think it already had me cached just signed in with 10E, so let's see what it does here. Okay, good. So email address, obviously the email address that I provided for you guys, which is basically the committee email. Name actually with the GTM1 or 2 designating the actual account. So I'll paste that in here and paste a password. So once you're logged in, you'll see an interface that has your ability to start a meeting and schedule a meeting and has the meeting history. So right now we see the 10 AFPM is already scheduled. This is a meet anytime recurring meeting, which means there'll be no actual time on this. So you'll have to check the copy calendar to see if there's a conflict. And if you see a recurring meeting in GoTo Meeting and you don't know what time it is, please double check the copy calendar for that committee to see when that is actually occurring. Okay, so there's two ways to do things here. This interface here allows you to do all the scheduling and starting, deleting, and editing of meetings. There's also a link down here to download GoTo Meeting. That will give you the app which runs in Windows and Mac separately, so you don't have to go here to actually do any of the scheduling or starting. So it just allows you to do it within an app and not within the browser. So if we're going to schedule a meeting through the browser, you hit schedule here on the right. We're going to put in test meeting. I'm going to put in a time, let's say 4 p.m. on the 15th. This is very important here. If you see this is not checked off for your audio, you need to check it off and edit the actual countries that are going to be included in your GoTo Meeting invitation. Check off all countries. We'll do it all in one shot. Hit done. Set your time, date, and duration of your meeting. Hit save.
The country check-in is to provide the phone numbers for access in those countries. That's
Correct.
What it's designed for.
Correct. Okay, now this is really convenient here because what you should probably do here at this point is once you have this meeting detail is set copy. So you can paste this into the Kavi event call-in field. That way everybody that gets your invite will have all the meeting details here. Once it's set up, you'll see the list here. It'll be listed here. Time, see this is opposed to a recurring meeting. It says meet anytime. This is an actual specific meeting time.
We have a question on the phone.
Yep.
Lars,
go ahead with the question.
You said checking off the countries that we're not participating. We don't really know where our members are residing.
No, you just check them all off, just so they're included all. So when you hit schedule.
Oh, you add them, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Just edit, just include them all. Yeah, you don't have to pick and choose which ones, just do all. Doesn't matter. Doesn't cost us any more or anything else.
Thank you.
Another question on the phone?
Yeah.
When you're setting the meeting time, where do you set the time zone for the time that you're using?
When you schedule it, there's a little prompt, a little blue. Mauricio, if you go back to schedule, it'll there's a little blue line just underneath the date, the time and dates, and it tells you what time zone you're in. So it should take care of it as long as your computer is in the correct time zone, and then it modifies that for everybody on their calendars.
Yep,
It's the
okay.
time zone where you are located at.
Right.
That should be correct, showing there. Now, if you're in a different place or it's incorrect, then you might check your computer to see if you want to change the time zone.
Right. I think that if you click on this, you can actually change and make any time zone you wish. So there's an option there to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have your meeting schedule. Any other questions?
So, did that answer your question on the phone?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
One question about this, if it is my time zone I have to put in my time what I wish to have the meeting, because up to now I always inserted the Eastern Daylight Time. I calculate this and then I put in there the Eastern Daylight Time.
Right. So if you want to put Eastern Daylight Time, if you select that pull-down menu and select Eastern Time Zone, then you can put on the Eastern Time Zone at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Or when you schedule the meeting in Kavi, Kavi will create the proper time zone for you when you're viewing Kavi for that meeting event. So.
There's another question. Marisa, back.
Go ahead, Meryl.
So I just in response to Friedrich's comment, isn't it the case that you can create the event in any time zone you wish, as long as you get the correct time in that time zone, and when other people see it, it will show up in their time zone, that the application does the conversion and presents it in the time that the viewer wants to see it in, just as Kavi does.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to assume that you're correct on that assumption.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, so Meryl's correct. And in fact, I strongly recommend that you add events in the local time zone. So for example, for the meetings that you're at today, the Kavi does in fact support the China time zone, which is countrywide. And if you were to schedule those meetings with the China time zone, with the local time of the meeting as was published in Bob's calendar, you would get the right answer no matter where you are and whatever time zone you've got set for Kavi. It would just turn out right magically. And trying to do the conversion in your brain is going to result in errors about half the time. So I would strongly encourage people to, wherever our local meetings are, schedule the meeting in that local time zone.
Especially when when we're transitioning from standard to daylight or daylight to standard, and different parts of the world do it at different times. Let the software take care of it for you.
All right.
Oh yeah, so spring and fall, you're going to mess it up double time. So yeah, always schedule it in the local time zone.
That's a good practice there, Mike. All right, so here you have several options for your meeting. You can see the time, the date of the meeting, the ability to start the meeting, delete it, edit it, or invite people. When you invite people, basically what you're doing is creating that copy of that detail that has all the numbers that you're going to put into Covey.
Right before this.
Microphone, please, so other people can hear.
Between the all countries discussion we just had and where you are now, there was I'm having trouble reading stuff on the screen. There was something about checking some other boxes is kind of a blur from
Yeah, let me
the
go
third
back
row
to that.
here.
Sure.
But you said it was important, so I wanted to make a note of that. I think it was in the schedule panel.
Mm-hmm. Your use of audio. So you want to make sure you've told the meeting to use computer and mic and long distance numbers.
Okay.
If you uncheck both of those, you're going to be SOL. So by default, when you create a meeting, it's already checked off. The only thing that might be different is the countries. So just double check the countries and make sure that everything's been checked off. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I just can't read it, but
Okay,
I got
Meryl.
what you said.
It probably would be good to point out with respect to the phone numbers, that doesn't in any way affect the phone numbers that people can use to call into a meeting. They will always be there worldwide. It only affects the ones that get listed in the announcement that get listed in the invitation. I think that's correct.
Yes.
And it's just so everybody understands, if you choose to include fewer because you know where your people are and you don't want to have as long a list included in the invitation, you can do that. And it won't stop anybody from joining from another country. But if they're trying to find the number, it's a lot more convenient if it's there for them than if they have to go to the central website to get that number. And Bruce wants to say something.
I would personally recommend always putting all the numbers, because although you may know where they live, you don't know where they are.
Right.
I'm in China. I still get calls at 1 a.m.
So any other questions from the room?
Is it allowed this also to schedule overlapping time, so that is the system aware that you
Aware what?
I think Friedrich wanted to know if the system knows if you've overlapped the meeting. So if I schedule another meeting right now for 4 p.m., the system just says, oh, you have another meeting at 4. So it'll it won't allow you to start both at the same time.
Right. And I think the other part of that is if you schedule a 1-hour meeting and go for an hour and 15 minutes, that's not an issue unless you end the meeting, and the meeting will go away and then you won't be able to restart it.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so once you've got your test set up, or your meeting, in this case it's the test, you can start it from here. So we're going to start it now.
Excuse me, Mauricio, this is Ed Royce.
Yeah, Ed.
So I'd like to expand on that last comment. Since all the TCs have 2 GTM numbers, GTM1 and GTM2, and the drafting group chairs are allowed to use either one of those to set up the meetings as they see fit, then those chairs will have to be careful, first of all, not to overlap with other meetings in on Kavi, which is always a good practice, but very particularly to make sure that you don't use the same GTM1 or GTM2 that somebody else is using at exactly that same time, because then you'll run into exactly the conflict that you were describing just a moment ago. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're sharing those GTM1 and GTM2 accounts.
I think the key here is, folks, is to make sure you put it on the CAVI calendar. That's going to be the thing that people are going to be able to look at when they schedule their meeting. So if you just set up a meeting on GoTo Meeting and you don't copy that and put it in the CAVI calendar, somebody else's could get stepped on. And Bruce?
Lars.
Having been on the GoTo Meeting Executive User Advisory Panel a few years ago, one of the things they actually advised their power users was that if you are a regular user with a regular group having regular meetings, to actually set up a recurring meeting, so that should you have finger trouble and accidentally curtail it, you can restart the meeting with the same number. It also means that if you're having the same DG or WG, always having a regular meeting, you've always got the same meeting ID, so you always know how to get into your particular meeting. But what that does do is means you have to be more strict with the calendar.
Right.
But if the CAVI calendar is the reference, that shouldn't be a problem.
Correct. Yep.
So to set up your DG or WG as a recurring meeting seems to be good practice.
Okay, we have 2 on the phone.
Yeah, Pat's in the queue, then Lars.
And then Friedrich.
Thank you, Bruce. That's absolutely spot on advice.
Top tips from somebody who should have a life.
Is you can look at the calendar from GoTo Meeting, because it will show you what's been scheduled, and see if it looks like there's somebody else that may conflict.
Yeah.
CAVI is useful and probably the normative tool, but look at GoTo Meeting as well. If you see there's a potential conflict, back off and talk to the other group and figure out what makes sense. Don't just stomp on them. It will be not a good outcome.
Okay, Lars. Thanks.
So Kind of a similar issue, but it seems to me that you won't have a conflict unless it's already on GoToMeeting. If it's not showing up on the page that you're showing right now, you won't have a conflict with that ID, right? So
Right,
for
but
the,
you need to check accounts.
yeah, but no, check where? Because the ID you picked, the only meeting scheduled right now is 10 FPM and test. No other meeting can be in conflict, right?
Correct, on the same account.
Yeah, and it's only the account we're checking for conflict, right?
Right, correct. So if you wanted to create another meeting at 4 p.m. tomorrow, you'd have to go to the 10E2 and schedule it there.
But one of the problems that can occur is if you notice that what we're looking at, one says meet anytime. So that could be a conflict.
Yes, and for that you need to check the calendar, but you don't need to look at like a 30 MR meeting for conflict because it's not using the same account.
Correct.
Correct. It's only within the TCs. So don't worry about the other TCs.
Which creates less overlap overall, I think.
And because it would be almost impossible to find out what account is using that meeting ID on Kavi, because that's not obvious unless you open the meeting.
That's true as well. I mean, it could be something that we can say the chairs can probably put in the dial-in info, which account they're using, GTM 1 or 2, just as a note in their dial-in details. Friedrich?
To look in the Kavi calendar, maybe it's dangerous in this case if you only in, let's say it's the corner case, if you're only in one TC, then you don't see the other one.
It's not an issue because TCs will only use the TC's accounts. We gave two accounts to each TC. So it won't be a conflict. It's only within a TC.
Right. So once you got the download here, you saw that there was a download of that GoToMeeting.exe file. You can just run it. At that point, it'll launch the panel that you're very familiar with that has the meeting detail, attendees, chat window, audio options. Might take just a bit to get it running on my virtual machine here, but it should start just momentarily.
Pat.
Yes, Pat.
You don't need that. You can do it from the web. Having said that, it is easy from the GoToMeeting scheduling page to see who else is trying to book meetings on a given day and date. They have done a really good job of keeping us as a SDO off each other's toes. And let's not obsess over it. I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of issues. It works. Let's move on.
Okay. So as you can see, I've started my meeting from the browser. It brought up the panel we're all familiar with here. I think everybody pretty much knows what to do at this point. You have your audio options, screen sharing, and you can have the audience view, your chat window, and your attendees where you can make anybody presenter or organizer. I highly recommend that if you're running the meeting, you make another person an organizer because GoToMeeting, if it dies as with one organizer, it will end the meeting. So it's a good idea to have the redundancy.
Don't do what Howard did and start a meeting for somebody as a presenter and then close his laptop and kill the meeting.
So
Make sure
that's
you have another organizer.
So that's basically how you started from the scheduling and starting of the meetings from the browser. So I'm going to end this meeting here, and then we'll do one last thing. There's the option of running the app. If you look at the bottom here, download GoToMeeting. If you download that, it will create the app, which runs here in the notification center. Now, you don't see it normally running, but it is running if you have started a meeting in the past. In the case with Bill, what just happened with Bill was logged in with GTM. See if I go to About here, it shows me who's logged in. So more than likely, Bill inadvertently just went to join a meeting, didn't realize that GoToMeeting was running, and it logged him in with that. So just be careful. It's something that you can change, though. once you're in, but if you're not mindful of that, it's going to show up and not have your name or affiliation listed. Okay, so down back. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, for chairs, one of the things to be aware of, it's a nice thing, and at times a not nice thing. It remembers you. And if, as I'm now being a consultant and have different clients for different meetings, having it remember me may or may not be a good thing. So for like Ed Royce and Merrill and the others that are consulting, Bill Miller, pay attention to the remember me. But it's a good thing on the whole, I think. I like the GoToMeeting app.
Yeah, from the app, you can actually sign out or exit. Once you've done that, you can go back to that URL that you're familiar with that has the GoToMeeting in the Kavi event. You can click on that. It will not log you in with this account. It will just start the meeting and have you join it.
You can do it from the GoToMeeting star thing at the top of the app page.
Right. Yeah, so I'm going to show you that now. So once you have this loaded here, you can actually click My Meetings. It will bring up this window where it shows you my test, Bill Miller's meeting, and that 10E Essence meeting is the base meeting that GoToMeeting has, which is this guy up here. 10E Essence's meeting. That's just kind of like a placeholder for GoToMeeting global meeting that you can have by just giving people this URL here, the GoToMeeting 10E, GoToMeeting.me TC-10E Essence. That's but we're not going to use that. You guys should just schedule your own stuff and have it listed independently. From here, you could also start meetings, invite, edit, and delete, just the same way as a browser. You can also schedule a new meeting here as well. When you're scheduling a new meeting on this side, it looks a little bit different than it does on the web, but the same options should be available to you. That's slightly different. It's not really that much. You can write the name of the meeting, how it occurs, select your audio options and your times, and it will show up again at the meeting list here. Yeah, Brian.
I think I'm on the right page to download the app, but it says downloading the desktop app is available only on paid plans.
Right. So what you'll need to do is log in. So you see I'm logged in at 10E.
Yeah.
You don't get this download unless you have a valid account.
Okay.
In our case, we have that for each committee.
Log in with one of the accounts that I was given.
Yeah, you log in first. Once you see this screen that has everything with My Meetings and settings, you'll see the download GoToMeeting. If you just go to the raw GoToMeeting page without being signed in, you'll get that, what you just described.
Q, Pat.
So, yeah, Pat.
I think we can all do it from just the plain vanilla GoToMeeting web page. You have a bunch more clicks, but you can get there from here. For ATSC, it has been really, really easy.
Okay, good to know, Pat. Thanks. So, I mean, that's basically it in terms of scheduling, starting, and viewing meetings. Just a reminder, I used to send out invites in Outlook. I did that because I had to schedule so many subgroup meetings and keep track of them that I needed them in my calendars. You don't need to do that now. You can just put the invite into Kavi. Kavi calendar will go ahead and populate Outlook with the correct meeting details and not have duplicate entries like you used to.
Yeah, one thing on the Kavi calendar, if you're a working group or a drafting group that's buried down, you should share it also with the standards community when you create the event. No, sorry. Oh, they're automatically shared.
Yeah, events are shared.
Yeah, so if you're, we were talking about checking the TC accounts, don't check your TC's calendar to see if there's conflicts, because if your subgroup happens to be a subgroup of a working group, your meetings will only get shared with your working group parent. They won't be shared all the way up to your TC, but they will all be shared to the standards community calendar. So check the standards community calendar for conflicts with other groups in your TC.
It's good to know.
I have
one other thing I wanted to point.
Was.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, sorry. We keep stepping on you and trying to. Anyway, so one other point for it, as we have several people now starting their own meetings. One other thing to remember is when you're finished with the meeting, always remember to close the meeting. Don't just leave it open and walk away.
Correct. Yep, that's right. Yeah, end the meetings, or else they'll be running forever. One other thing that we can do here when you edit is if you wanted to add a little layer of security to the meeting, you can create a password for the meeting. So in addition to having the URL, you need to have the password for the meeting. So I don't see a case that you need to do that, but sometimes you may need to do it. So you can actually, I'm going to edit this meeting real quick so I can show you.
And we are trusting everybody's on their honor system, that they'll use this for SMPTE work and not scheduling their Boy Scout troop meetings.
Okay, it's not coming up. I don't know why. There it is. Okay.
We like our Boy Scout troop.
We like our Boy Scout troop. Yeah, in that same meeting edit for the details, there's a password tab where you can require a meeting password, and you can define that password there. And then you can share that with whoever you need to share it with. Another thing I wanted to point out with the app is when you have the recording, by default, the recordings go into a recording folder within Documents and Windows, and also with the Mac. You can actually set that folder to whatever folder you like. So if you want that to be in a different path, you can define it there. I don't know why it's taking so long to bring up some of this stuff. Come on.
It's dependent upon the OS, Mauricio.
Right, and I'm running Windows 10 in a VM right now, so it's a little sluggish. Okay, well, oh, here we go. Okay. So there's a recording section of the category. You can actually set the path here. Okay, and you can set it to record and GoToMeeting audio, or don't record anything. And you can actually convert your recordings if you haven't done so at that point. It'll take you to the actual folder where your recordings are, where you can select anything you want to convert and have it ready to distribute accordingly.
Yeah, so they do have to be converted correctly.
Yeah, and usually at the end of the meeting, it'll ask you to convert. You can hold off on that.
Checkbox there for that radio button.
Yeah, don't remind me. You don't want that. You want to be reminded. What happens is if you're not ready to convert something, because sometimes it takes a long time, you can queue them up. And when you queue up, that's when you go to convert recordings now. And that'll show you everything you have in your recorded queue. It's ready to be converted. I think that's all I have, really. Any other questions?
Oh, wonderful on the recordings.
Yeah, and it works well on Mac, so you're not going to have a problem on either platform.
I don't use Mac.
Yes, we know, Pat.
Yeah, we can tell by your microphone.
Thank you, Howard.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. Thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And hopefully this will work out quite good for us as we go forward. And again, if there's any people that are missed in the DG groups or lower down that need a little bit of a walkthrough, I think Mauricio would be happy to do that on a one-on-one basis, provided he has a little bit of time to spare.